Palm Sunday, if that's language that's not totally familiar to you, it's the Sunday every year that the church, really historically, I mean, we know that they did this as early as the second century, would get together and remember Jesus coming into Jerusalem. It starts off, kind of kicks off his last week on earth before the cross. We will celebrate some Christians all week long and try to think about what Jesus would have been doing on the different days. On Friday of this week, Good Friday, we'll take time here as a service on that Friday night just to remember the cross and remember the great sacrifice that he did. And next week, Easter Sunday, be our biggest Sunday all year long, and we'll try to remember the resurrection and think about the power of that and how that power is at work in us. But Palm Sunday kicks it all off, and Palm Sunday kicks off what has traditionally been known as Holy Week, or sometimes Passion Week. Passion comes from the Latin passio, which means suffering. So it's a week that kind of kicks off. It's a downhill climb all the way through this week, from Palm Sunday today, when Jesus rolls into the city and everybody cheers, to Good Friday, when everybody asks for him to be crucified. And so we want to think about, as we get into that, kind of what was going on in the city there. When Jesus came in and what led the people to act like they did, and at some level to think about maybe what led them to turn on him later on in the week like they do. So as we go through that, I just want to think a couple different thoughts. First, I don't think people have evolved that much since then. I think people then technology certainly has improved, and our standard of living is much, much better than theirs was, basic hygiene and things like that. But in terms of just what people want out of life, and what people are trying to become, and how people think, and how we reason, I don't think we've evolved that much in the last couple thousand years. And the things that they were hit by and tempted by are things that we can be hit by and tempted by. And so it's interesting to see how they reacted and think about why they did, and then also think if maybe we would have reacted the same way. When Jesus comes into the city, and we'll read those, Lexi read it earlier, but I'm going to read big chunk of it again. When we think about Jesus coming into the city, and we think about how he rolled in there, and that first Sunday, and how he operated, the crowd went wild. I mean, they threw their cloaks on the ground. A lot of them did, so that the donkey and Jesus on the donkey could roll over those. Donkey's feet wouldn't have to go on the ground. Which is a super humbling, crazy thing to do. They took palm branches and waved those up in the air, and put some palm branches on the ground for him to ride on those too. And the palm branches doesn't mean as much, I guess, in America, but very nationalistic symbol. A lot of the coins that Israel minted during that time had palm branches on them. And it all goes back to that time between the Greeks and the Romans, that little sliver of time when the Jews were free, when they were independent, and when the Maccabees, they were the rulers of Israel during that stretch, the Jewish rulers of the Jewish people, and they waved palm branches to celebrate their new Israeli king. And so whenever you see the palm branches, there's that hope a lot of Israelites had that maybe Jesus, maybe this guy, is going to be the guy to make us Israel again. You know, maybe they all had little red hats with palm branches on it. Make Israel great again, you know, as coming into the city. That kind of a notion, right? And maybe Jesus will be the guy who will fix that and make it right. When they call him Son of David, that's what they're doing. So David was the greatest king Israel ever had. And so let's go back to that golden age of David, they're saying. You know, and I think, again, I don't think we've evolved that much. I think people have this idealized moment in their life that either they've not got to yet, or maybe it's a long time ago. And wouldn't it be great if life could be like that? If we could just have that. Maybe we can get to that point again. And when we get to that point, that'll be awesome. And I'll be awesome. And everybody will be happy. And that's what I want. And that's what they're all cheering for when Jesus comes in. Now, I do think, as people, then and now, we have a remarkable ability, most of us, to kind of go on autopilot when we're surrounded by bad information or bad stuff. It's not It's not actually, it's kind of a nice feature sometimes, but we can ignore bad things. Like you might have a table at your house, a kitchen table, and one of the chairs is a little shaky or a little bad. Well, has a bad leg or doesn't sit quite right. And as a family, you all know to avoid that chair. You know, you don't even think about it anymore. Family sits down, nobody sits in that chair. Or if they do sit in the chair, they sit kind of uncomfortable, but they know going in what they're getting into, and they will sit in such a way as not to have any problems. But then you'll have a guest come in, and they'll go for the chair, and the family's like landing on the grenade. Oh, no. Don't sit on that chair. You know, all of a sudden you can see it again. You hadn't thought about it for months, but then here it is, or a dog. You have a dog, and the dog jumps on all of you when you're walking into the house, and you don't think a thing about it. And then 80-year-old Aunt Edna has come over to visit, and the dog's jumping. And, I don't know what that dog's doing. We never see it like that. And it jumps all the time. But you don't notice it when it's just you there. You notice it when we have an ability to do that, and just to ignore the bad information. Mom or dad goes into the teenager's room. How do you live in this mess? Right? The kid walks carefully around the mess to get to where the parent is. What mess, they say. They don't even notice it anymore. And I think we can do that. And as a thing that we do individually, in the big scheme of things, most of the time it's harmless. But families, like I say, can do it too. And we just sort of ignore or we put up with one person's addiction or one person's bad behavior, one person's temper. We just all deal with that. And we don't think it'll change. In a community, you can do that, That's just the way it is. Some people don't get as good a shake as other people, and nothing you can do about it. And we just schools can do that, have certain systems of behavior, and churches can. Every time we hire somebody, especially if we hire somebody from outside, I'm always very interested in what they see that's not quite right with us, because I don't see it as much anymore. How do you preach in a mess like that? What mess, I say as I walk around it. I don't even notice it. And you don't think about it. I mean, again, like I say, it's a normal thing that people do. It's a normal thing that churches do and communities do and families do. And honestly, it'd be hard to survive if we didn't have that. And we don't always like people calling attention to it. My car will chirp at me in about a half a mile if I don't put my seatbelt on. And I never am happy about that. I'm never happy to be reminded. Sometimes I might be in the car and some other family members in the car with me, and the chirping will start, and they will say, "Oh, Dad, your seatbelt." And I don't like that either. I don't like that extra little bit of help, either. And I know exactly what it is, and I know what would fix it. It just makes me mad that I'm getting chided about it. So I'll put the seatbelt on. And I have a friend with me, and my friend and I are going, and it'll chime if he doesn't put his seatbelt on. And so my seatbelt's on, and it chimes, and he doesn't do anything about it. Maybe he thinks it's my problem, my car's doing something weird. And I don't want to be that guy, so I don't say anything. And then it does it again. And then it does it a third time, and he finally says, "Oh, wait, my seatbelt. I'm sorry. I didn't realize it was time for me to put his seatbelt on." And he says, "I know how to fix your car, so that won't happen." And I was very interested in this information. It was very interesting to me, because I don't know that it's easier just to deal with the broken part, right? It's easier just not to pay attention to it, because paying attention means you got to, anyway, so Jesus comes into the city, right? And at some level, he's that chime. It doesn't have to be this way. It can be this other way. Now, con artists take advantage of this impulse. They do. Charles Ponzi, for whom the Ponzi scheme is named, says that he can make you rich with just a little bit of an investment. And people wanted to believe the con. I read an article about it, and that was the article. People wanted to believe the con. And that's always how cons work, right? People wanted to believe it. I could take this pill and lose all the weight, or I could take this course and become fabulously wealthy, or I could go to make this one little tweak and my husband or wife would do exactly what I think they are. And there's a temptation, right? It'd be easy. I'll just do this one little adjustment, like the car, adjust the car, and then it won't chime at me or beep at me, or then I'll be happy and we'll be back to a great kind of a thing. And all of these kinds of weird impulses are being placed on Jesus. And that he's going to come in and he's going to fix things. Because they're not really a happy people. They're frustrated. The Romans have them under their thumb. Jesus has been preaching about how their religion really isn't working for them, and that's created a lot of tension. And then they have all the same tensions that everybody has. Addiction and frustration and poverty and bills and headaches. So keeping all that in mind, that's how they looked at Jesus when he came in, and that's why they got as excited as they did. And I just want to read the scripture again. It says this: as they approached Jerusalem, they came to Bethphage on the Mount of Olives. Jesus sent 2 disciples. We know in another gospel it's Peter and John. He sends 2 disciples, and he said to them, go to the village ahead of you, and at once, he says, you'll find a donkey tied there with her colt beside her. Untie him and bring him to me. And if anyone says anything to you about that, you tell them the Lord needs them. And he'll send them right away. So if a guy gives you grief about it, you just mention the Lord needs them, and he'll let it go. And there's people who look at this a couple different ways, and I don't know which one of these it is, to be fair. Because it doesn't really tell us. This could be completely miraculous. You know, Jesus sends these 2 guys in, and it just happens that God has already put the animals there where they need to be. And when these guys say those magic words, the guy will just naturally, oh, well, great, and he'll be okay with it. And that's how it'll work. It's a miracle. There's other guys who think that Jesus has set all this up ahead of time. He's already talked to that dude and said, I'm going to send 2 guys in, and they'll say this, and that's how you'll know. And because Jesus wants to be seen as the Messiah. I'm going to come into Jerusalem and I'm going to get to that in a minute. He's got to come in a certain way to fulfill prophecy, and that Jesus has set that up ahead of time. And then there's this third thought that he's finally acting like a king. Think about a policeman commandeering a car on the highway. I need your car, you know. I'm in the middle of my official duty. You need to get out of it. I need your car. I'm taking your car. And that Jesus kind of pulls rank in that sort of way. He's finally acting like a king. And that this guy accepts that Jesus is going to be the king. He's going to be the one to come in to fix it all. And it all took place, and this is the prophecy. If it is a thing he's trying to do on purpose, this is what he's after. It all took place to fulfill what was spoken of by the prophet. Say to daughter Zion, your king comes to you. He's gentle and riding on a donkey, on a colt, on the foal of a donkey. And this prediction from Zechariah that Jesus would come into the city when he came in, and he'd be on a donkey's colt, and the idea of an unbroken animal. But he'd be so peaceful, such a prince of peace, that the animal would be at peace as he comes into town. And that's how you'd know him. You know, that when the Messiah finally comes, he'll come in like that. And Jesus wants them to know, I am your king coming to you. He wants people to take that picture and have that in their head. The disciples went, did just like Jesus told them, brought the donkey and the colt and placed their cloaks on them for Jesus to sit on. And a very large crowd spread their cloaks on the road. And other people cut branches from the trees. And we know in other Gospels they're palm branches, and which makes sense. It wouldn't be big logs and throw them on the ground. Palm branches. And they spread them there on the road. And the crowds that went ahead of him and those that followed shouted, Hosanna to the Son of David. Now that word Hosanna is a kind of a Jewish sound-alike word. It means save us. That's what it means. So save us, Son of David. That's the first thing they're saying. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And Hosanna in the highest heaven, like save us in the best way, and as only you can, to the nth degree, highest heaven. Just save us completely, God. That's what they're calling out. And Jesus, we want you to do this. We want you to save us. And again, we don't know exactly if they even know what they want him to save them from, right? Save us from the Romans. That's probably part of what they're thinking. You know, kick these Romans out of here. You know, we'll have our country back. Now, if anybody's going to say, save us from these high taxes, that's kind of a relevant thing for us right now here in the second week of April, right? And maybe they were doing that. Save us from these high taxes. You know, the Romans are just killing us. Save us from that, God. Or save us from, Jesus has been preaching about graceless religion over and over again for months and months and months. Save us, God, from this graceless religion. Help us know how we can come close to God. Maybe they're praying about that. Save us, God. And maybe they're saying about smaller things. Maybe somehow they understand that, save us from ourselves. Save us, give us direction. Come be the leader. Come be the king. Come be the guy who's going to fix things. And so they all cry out and they all hope that Jesus is going to be the one. And it seems like everybody likes Jesus. When Jesus entered Jerusalem, the whole city was stirred. And they asked, well, who is this? And the crowd would answer, others say, this is Jesus. He's the prophet from Nazareth in Galilee. In that moment, when everybody likes Jesus, that's powerful. There's a thing about Jesus, of course, that is certainly likable. There's a reason why Jesus, people who don't even care about the Lord at all, still feel like they should put a cross on their neck or say a prayer in trouble. There's something comforting about this knowledge that there's a God who loves us, will take care of everything and fix it, right? There's something about that I think that we're hungry for, to know that we're not the last word, that maybe there is a God who will catch us when we die. Maybe there's a God on the other side who cares when we hurt. And if we pray, he'll answer it. I think that part of Jesus and that picture of Jesus is real attractive. And that picture of Jesus then was real attractive. He'll come be our king, right? He'll be our prophet. And maybe here they're meaning even Moses predicted there'd be a prophet like Moses one day that would come. Maybe they're even thinking he's that prophet. Be a priest, cover us with us and God, help make us right. They don't know for sure who he is. That's why the question's there. They don't know for sure who he is, but they want to know. This might be the guy. Now, that question pops up a couple other times in Scripture. Jesus, in one story, he's on a boat, and it's been a long, hard couple of days, and he's tired, he's wore out, and I get that. I mean, sometimes you're just so wore out you can't function any longer. Just this week, just a couple of days ago, my youngest daughter had a daughter. And she labored for almost just lost sleep for 2 nights with labor, really long delivery, had to push for several hours, and finally a new baby, and what a cool thing. And all she wanted to do the next day was be with the baby, but all her body wanted to do was to sleep. And it was so hard to stay awake. And so Julia and I were there trying to help her because she just so exhausted, I had a cough, and nobody seemed to care about me at all. But anyway, they were really worried about her and that she was doing bad and really concerned. And Jesus had a hard couple days and a hard week or two, and he just can't stay awake. And they get there on the lake, and a pretty rough ride. Storm comes up, and everything's going nuts. And the disciples finally get scared enough to wake Jesus up. Aren't you going to do something? Don't you care? We're about to drown. And Jesus gets up and he calms the storm. That's the story. Peace be still, he says, and the storm goes to nothing. And then he turns to the disciples, why are you afraid? And what they wanted to say, the disciples, well, because there was a storm. But now they're all freaked out because of him, right? In the storm we understood. This here we're not sure about. It says they were afraid of the storm, but the third line there, they're terrified about Jesus, right? Afraid of the storm, but they're terrified about Jesus, and they ask each other, who is this? And the reason I point this question out is it's not the only time they asked that about Jesus. They asked, of course, when he went into the triumphal entry, but they ask it here too, who is this? Who is this guy? You know? And probably the lesson that they took out of this, they'd still know who he is totally or what he's about, but the lesson they took is Jesus, nothing bad's going to happen if Jesus is there, right? As long as Jesus is there, we shouldn't be afraid. He's going to fix everything. That's probably the lesson they took. And it probably wasn't the right lesson to take, but that's probably the lesson they took. And it's probably why they reacted so hard when he gives himself up for the cross. Wait a minute. I thought you were. Another time they asked about it. Jesus he's in his hometown. He's preaching, and these guys come, and they've got 4 of them. They've got a friend who's paralytic, and they try to get the paralyzed man to Jesus so he could touch him and heal him, but they can't get to Jesus. So they go on top of the roof and they tear the roof apart. It's thatch and mud and dirt, and they tear the roof apart, and they lower this guy right in front of Jesus. And Jesus looks down to the guy and says, friend, your sins are forgiven. And the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, they're watching this happen, and they began, well, who is this? Who is this guy that thinks he can forgive sins? I mean, who's this guy think he is that he can do this thing and that he can say these things? Hang on. I didn't put the verse on there. There's an interesting, I should have put another verse on there. There's an interesting tie here. Jesus, at the end of it, says to those guys, those Pharisees, I know what you're thinking. Right? Again, they don't say to Jesus, who is this? They don't say, they're thinking it to themselves. And Jesus, I know what you're thinking. He said, but what's easier, to tell this guy his sins are forgiven or tell him he can walk again? And meaning, if I tell him his sins are forgiven, you can't see that, but you could certainly see if he walked again. And Jesus says, I want you to know that I can do this. So he heals him. And the guy walks out, and he's got new legs, and he's got a clean soul. And they all know it. And I don't think that probably stopped them from asking. Again, there's this notion that Jesus is totally in control if he wants to be. That Jesus, if you're with Jesus, it's managed. And when he comes in on Palm Sunday, those are the thoughts that are in their head. And so when they're calling out, Hosanna, Hosanna, save us, Jesus, they believe he absolutely can. But by the end of the week, they're going to be saying things like, he can't even save himself. He's confusing Jesus. He's going to go on his terms and not on ours. And right then's when people start turning on him. After the crucifixion, on Easter Sunday, 2 guys are walking outside of town, and Jesus sees those 2 guys walking, and he has a conversation with them. And what's wrong with you guys, Jesus says. And they say, well, they don't know it's Jesus. And they say, well, Jesus was crucified, and we had hoped he'd be the one to save us. They just didn't totally understand all of it. What they hoped Jesus would do would be to fix it like a repairman, and then they could go live their lives. And if they needed something else fixed, they could go to Jesus and he'd fix it. And then they go live their lives. And that wasn't really what he came to do. He came to take away our sins so that we could live for him. The way that Jesus intended to save us was for us to come to him. And that was the last verse. This one I'll close on. Jesus says, come to me if you're weary and you're burdened, and I'll give you rest. The crowd that's calling out to him on Palm Sunday, save us, save us, save us. Come on, he says. Come on. If you're weary and burdened, if you're getting beat up by the world, if you feel like everything's knocking you down, well, good news. You can be saved. I can take care of that, Jesus says. Well, how? Well, you got to come to me. You got to come this direction. He says, you take my yoke upon you, and you learn from me, for I'm gentle and humble in heart, and you'll find rest for your souls. My yoke is easy, he says, and my burden is light. And it's an easy yoke, but it's still a yoke. A yoke is what they put on oxen, and it was a metaphor that Pharisees and other teachers used to talk about teaching. Take my teaching on you like a yoke, And it's an easy yoke as yokes go, but it's still a yoke. You've got to come to him and give your life to him and go through his filter, and he'll give you rest. And not everybody wants that deal. Again, I think about myself with the seatbelt chiming. I don't know if I want to hear that. Or somebody giving me criticism about really anything. It doesn't really matter. Anything I'm doing wrong. And I don't want to hear it. I want to do what I want to do. But I know doing what I do has got me to here. And it's not gotten me to rest. It's not gotten me to being unburdened, right? It's not got me to peace. Jesus says, come to me and I can give you all of those things. And there were some people in Jesus' time who found that offer fantastically appealing. I know it sounds too good to be true, but it was fantastically appealing. And they came to him, and they served, and they loved, and they forgave, and they took up their cross, and they found life there. And other people didn't. They just didn't want to do it his way. And that same tension, people haven't evolved that much. It never changes. It's the same tension today. It's the same thing today, the same offer today. Anyone can come and be changed. They just got to come. I was watching online a debate between a person who's more of an atheist agnostic and a Christian, and the atheist agnostic said, like sometimes it gets said in these sorts of debates, there's absolutely no proof, he says, that the resurrection was real. And as I'm watching that, I think to myself, except for the billions of people over 2,000 years who say they've been transformed by it. This is not like a Ponzi scheme that runs out. It's not like a con that doesn't have any legs to it. I mean, over the last couple of centuries, people have been, or 20 centuries, people have been transformed by this thing, have been completely remade by this thing, have found that Jesus can absolutely save them from those parts of their life, from their parts of their marriage, from those parts of their family, from those parts of their community, their upbringing, their hurt, their pain, their experience. He can save them from that and give them a power and a hope and a strength and a purpose that's transformative and that lasts. I mean, the proof of it is the dozens of churches all over our town and the millions and billions of Christians all over the world who this week and next week are giving thanks again to Jesus who gave everything for them. And we try to remember that at Palm Sunday and to think about when he came in as a king. And we want to acknowledge him that way, that he is the king. And that as the king, he deserves all our respect and all our authority and all our soul. Deserves all of it. And we ask God to come in to our lives and make some sort of a change there, whatever he needs to do. because we know that on the other side, he's going to take us someplace good. Now, as the band comes back up, I want to challenge you here. Maybe you need to make some sort of a decision about where you stand with God. And maybe you need to make some sort of a decision about how you get yourself straight with him. This is the time to do that sort of thing. If you come in here, I said earlier, Jesus, quoting Jesus, if you're burdened and heavy laden, if that describes you, carrying way too much and having to move around under the weight of so much, well, you too can be transformed. And you too can be saved. You just have to ask. Won't you stand up?